Good morning, students, and welcome to this talk on It's All in the Mind on the occasion of National Youth Day. We have amongst us Dr. Saurabh, who is also Assistant Professor from the School of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. Now, in case you're wondering as to how Saurabh sir is going to be giving the talk today, now Saurabh sir has always been associated with the Ramakrishna Mutt. Now, maybe he'll share a couple of anecdotes from his association with the Mutt. But let me give a very, very brief intro of Saurabh Todariya sir. He is from School of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, as I've already mentioned. And his basic interest involve phenomenology. Well, that's a big word. Okay, and the second one is pretty interesting, self, consciousness, and AI. Now, this is what it is called as moving towards technology, self, consciousness, and AI. And the third one happens to be, his interest happens to be time and history. Now, these are his basic interests. And as I already mentioned, he's been associated with the Ramakrishna Mission for quite some time. And we thought he would be the apt person to share the information which he is going to share today. And this certainly is going to help us to listen and understand the life of Swami Vivekananda a little bit more. Wishing you all happy National Youth Day. And I'd like to hand over the platform to Dr. Saurabh Todariya to take it forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible? First, I need to check.
Yes, you can.
Okay. So first, I would like to thank Revati ma'am for giving me opportunity to present my ideas on Swami Vivekananda on the National Youth Day. And I also would like to thank SRM University for holding such a program and giving me opportunity to present my ideas. And I'm also thankful to the students who have taken their time to attend this, and some of the students I know and colleagues who are present here. So I'm so thankful to them. So basically what I'm going to do in this talk, that I have divided the talk basically into the three sections. On the so in the very first talk, what I'm going to do, in the first section, I'm going to introduce the ideas of Swami Vivekananda and what is his main ideas. And second, I would like to connect with the modern problem of the consciousness and the mind. And third, I would like to see how some of the ideas which Swami Vivekananda held preempted the current discourses on the consciousness and neurosciences. So this is I'm going to do, and I have tried to do, because this is a vast gamut and I have to do it in the 30 to 40 minutes. So it might raise more questions than the answer. So you have to bear with me. So I'll start sharing my screen. As you can see that we are going to discuss today Swami Vivekananda life and ideas. Is it visible to you? Okay.
Yes, it is visible. Please go ahead.
Okay. So there are a few very interesting facts about Swami Vivekananda. As you all people know, that he was born in the 12th Jan 1863 in Kolkata to a middle-class Bengali family. And from the very childhood, he was very passionate about knowing the things, not through the belief, but through the direct experience. This is, if we read his biography by Swami Nikhilananda, or by the very famous biography Swami Vivekananda by Eastern and Western disciples, or by the Romeo Rella. In all these kinds of the biography, he was constantly passionate and struggling with the thoughts, because on the one hand there was a modern education, and on the other hand there was, there was a tradition where there was so much talk about the God and all this kind of the things, but he was not ready to accept it on the face value. So he used to ask every question, whosoever was talking about the God, he used to ask those person directly whether you have seen the God. If they say, no, we have not seen the God, you have to do this and that, then he used to reject. So finally, this question brought him to his guru, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, whom he asked the question that whether you have seen the God. He replied, yes, I have seen the God, and the way I'm seeing you, but with much more clarity. So this actually led to his lifelong association with Sri Ramakrishna. which transformed Narenath Datta to Swami Vivekananda, which is a very interesting story. It is like a very, with a lot of up and down. He faced unemployment, his father's death, and there is so much interesting stories about that, which for the limitation of the time we can't go through all. So how Swami's transformation happened? And what way he was different from the other kinds of the monks of his time? That basically the sannyasis ideal of the monkhood was guided in India mostly, not all, but by the personal salvation, that you have to finally attain the moksha or the liberation from the cycle of life and death. And at first he was very much interested in personal salvation, but after the meeting of his guru, and when his guru left his body, he became the wandering monk. And then while he experienced the poverty and the social degeneration of Indian society in the form of the untouchability, in form of the caste discrimination, gender discrimination, which is vividly mentioned in his biography by both his Eastern and Western disciple, published by Ramakrishna Math, Belur. So while the wandering, finally he reached to the Kanyakumari, the southernmost tip of India, which is now called as the Vivekananda Rock, and he swam and reached to that rock and meditated there for 3 days and the night. And finally there he realized that he should not spend the time, he should not seek only the personal salvation, but like the Buddha, he should think about the humanity and spread the truth about the Hinduism and its lofty ideals. So without any preparation and support, he went all alone to US with the help of some of his disciples for participating in the Parliament of the World Religions to be held in Chicago, which was to be held on 11th September 1893. Now, what actually happened there in the Parliament of the World Religions? Now, there are so many misconceptions of Swami Vivekananda. Some people say that he went there and finally he spoke on zero and then he became popular, but all these are the not verified and all the false stories. What actually happens, he, after facing many odds, he spent there a lot of the time and he suffered a lot because he didn't have any money or the support, and social system of USA didn't support sannyasis and they mistook him as a beggar and all that. But because of his grit and determination, finally he got the chance to speak at the Parliament. Before that, interesting, he never gave any public talk. He used to talk in the personal interaction. So he stood up and started his lectures by saying, "My American sisters and brothers." This led to the 2 minutes of the constant clapping and standing ovation to Swamiji, because this was a very new thing, because through this he emphasized on the universal brotherhood and sisterhood of Hinduism. So he spoke on the various features of Hinduism, and basically he quoted the Shiv Mahimana Truth, he quoted the many quotes from the original Vedas, Upanishad, and finally emphasized that all religions are true, and as the all river finally merge into the ocean, similarly all paths. So, which is basically the idea of Ramakrishna also, Yato Mata Tato Patha, like that. So finally he gave the universal message of Hinduism, that we should not fight with each other, rather accept all religions as true. He talked about the universal acceptance which is enshrined in Hinduism, and his idea of universally and brotherhood led the people to comment there that in Parliament everyone spoke about their own religion, but it is Swami Vivekananda who spoke about the all religion. So this universal acceptance based on the Vedantic philosophy, which struck the chord in the word parliaments of the world religion. So Swami Vivekananda has been a personality which is a very wide range, and he is so depth, so it is very difficult. But one of the most original contribution of Swami Vivekananda is practical Vedanta. So according to him, so that Vedanta is the true essence of Indian soil and philosophy, which does not distinguish between the man and God. So this is Vedanta. There are 6 systems of Indian philosophy, but Vedanta is one of the most important system. what it says that there is no difference between the Jivatma and Paramatman, or into the human and the God, because the consciousness is the same. So we should consider every human as divine. He finally said that each soul is potentially divine, and the aim is to manifest it. Shift from Swami Vivekananda's, there is a kind of we are going to shift from how the Swami Vivekananda ideas can address to the modern realm of the mind, consciousness, AI, and all that. So this might seem a weird connection, but let me try to do that. Now, let us see why the mind matters. What is this mind? As the talk of the title of the talk is, why does the mind matter, right? So mind is a puzzling and the complex phenomena for the psychologist, neuroscientist, and the philosopher. Now, if brain is just the input-output computation machine, then why the mind is needed? Because brain is doing just processing and input-output is happening. So famous neuroscientist and philosopher David Chalmers said the unique thing about the mind or human mind is that we all experience the mental movie theater. No matter what will happen, whenever we close our eyes or wake up eyes, we think our mind all the time imagining, expecting, anticipating, projecting. And that is what mind does and which makes us who we are. So this mental movie theater, this mental is what makes us unique. So if we remove this mind, if we remove this mental movie, then there is no difference between the robots and the humans, because robot can also do the same kind of the tasks, you know, through the input and the output, but it is the humans which do the task, but at the same time they have this mental movie theater, which a robot or AI don't have or can't have. So brain is physical and mind is non-physical. You can open up the body, find the brain, but mind is non-physical, and this is established by in the modern discourse by the Chalmers, great scientists, V.C. Ramachandran, Thomas Nagel, and all that. So let us assume that talk about the Mary's room. This is a famous thought experiment which is given by Frank Jackson, which established that what is so unique about the mind. Let us imagine Mary is a brilliant scientist who is, for whatever reason, forced to investigate the world from a black and white room via black and white television monitor. Now she specializes in the neuroscience and acquires all the physical information, which is to obtain about what goes on when we see the ripe tomatoes or use the terms like red, blue, and so on. She discovers, for example, which wavelength combinations from the red object stimulate the retina, and exactly how this produces by the nervous system, what will happen now. So the thing is that Mary is a brilliant scientist. She knows each and everything about the color red, what kind of the neurophysical impact it generates on our mind, what kind of the wavelength and the physical properties. The question is that what will happen when one day Mary is raised from the black and white room and actually see a red color in a red flower. So will she learn anything new or not? Given that all the physical information about the color red she knows, and when she's there. So answer is yes, she learns because she learns experience. She doesn't know new property, new kind of the information, but there is something like to experience something. So this is called by the scientists as a qualia. So informations are objective. We can know each and everything, say about the SRM University through the information about the brochures, about each and everything. But when we actually come to the SRM AP University, this is the experience. So even if we know each and every information about that, but this experience is something which is subjective, and that is called as the qualia by the scientist. So this subjective experience of feeling the qualia cannot be codified or objectified in the propositional knowledge like SSP, SSQ, like that. So it is called as the irreducible first person experience qualia. And this is called as the hard problem of consciousness by David Chalmers. What are the soft problem of the consciousness? We can know, okay, if we see the color red, what kind of the property is generated by the brain, which neurons fired, what kind of the physical impact it has, but what it's like to feel that. What does it like to have that experience? This cannot be known through any kind of the physical experimentation. So this makes consciousness as a kind of the puzzling phenomena, and this is a very well-established problem in the modern neuroscience, in the philosophy, and in the philosophy of mind. Now, what the Swami Vivekananda suppose had to say on this? Of course, this problem is new. Now, consciousness, we will take Swami Vivekananda's ideas are mostly influenced by the Vedanta. So, Swami Vivekananda anticipated this heart form of consciousness. In the lectures on Raj Yoga, he said that consciousness cannot be studied in the objective manner, and we have to study it subjectively. Now, what does it mean to study it subjectively? It requires the observation of mind, what is called as the meditative or reflective practice. So only through the observation, the nature of mind is known. Now, this knowing is not a conceptual kind of the knowing. Like if I am observing mind and I'm saying P is 2, it is different from observing a bottle which is outside of me. And I say, okay, if I observe it, I say it is a blue in color, it is a hard in nature. So this is a proposition kind of the knowledge I'm generating. But this is observing the mind is something, it is a tacit non-conceptual awareness that I exist, I am. What does it prove? That consciousness is not an object. So mind projects the realities which are based on its interest and interprets the word and the situation accordingly. However, in this process, the true nature of things remain hidden or unmanifested. So whenever we think about the mind, so basically mind projects the reality which is based on the interest and the interpretation of the word, that okay, I have to go there and that is the situation. So this makes the this creates a word around us. So in this process, what happens, the true nature of the things remain hidden. What are the true nature of the things? So reflection or meditation is something which reveals the true nature of the things. So there is a kind of the difference between the psychological life and consciousness and thought and being. Now, what is this difference? That on the one hand, mind produces the psychological life where it interprets, informs, conceptualizes the thing. On the other hand, consciousness is beneath that. It is kind of an awareness, and that is why there is a difference between the thought and the being. And the process of the reflection or the meditation is basically a reflection. In that reflection, we remain aware of this separation in the consciousness. That consciousness on the one hand interprets the word, give us information about the word. On the other hand, it remains as a pure awareness, as existence. So psychological feelings we all experience by the human beings without making any effort. But a silent and the meditative mind is required in order to observe the consciousness as it is not an object. So this is the main point of the focal point of this discussion, that consciousness is not an object. So on the other hand, we are through the neuroscience, through the psychology, we can understand the various modification of the consciousness, how the consciousness interprets the world, how the consciousness is manifesting in terms of many kind of the behavior. So these behavior feelings can be interpreted psychologically, can be studied psychologically, or through the neuroscience also. But consciousness in itself, as it manifests in the form of the qualia that we are experiencing, that this is something which is not possible to interpret. So it is not possible to interpret consciousness through in the terms of the object and kind of the thing. So this psychological feeling, so this makes the consciousness a juggernaut for the scientists, for the neuroscientists. But from the Vedantic point of view, that is what distinguish the consciousness from the other kind of the objects in the world. So we come back to the main crux of our talk. It's all in the mind. What does it mean that it's all in the mind? So the observation of one's mind reveals the nature of mind, which is constantly changing from one thought to the other. Now the question arises that, okay, consciousness is something which cannot be studied objectively, and we have argued based on Vedanta that we need to observe the consciousness. Now the question comes that, okay, what does benefit this observation can give to us? You know, it is just like wasting the time if we are sitting in meditation or just observing the consciousness. It is better to give us, you know, kind of a motivation or think about some very good things rather than just silently observing this mind. So what kind of the benefit it can give? Now, what the Vedanta and Swami Vivekananda tells in his work, that when we observe the consciousness, when we observe the mind, it actually gives us the truth about the mind, what the mind is consistent, what is the nature of the mind. So one nature, the most important and the most significant nature of the mind is revealed in that it is constantly changing from one thought to the other. There is the one thought and then it constantly moves to the another thought. So mind is something which is not fixed at one place. It will always change from one place to another. Sometimes it will be happy, sometimes it will be sad, sometimes it will in the past, sometimes in the future. So mind will keep on changing. Now, the question arises, when we use the word, okay, mind is changing, how do we know that it is changing? So change cannot be perceived unless we assume the unchanging entity which witness the change. For example, if the trees, if we are in the science student can easily understand that you need, there is a stationary thing is required in order to perceive the change. So a stationary or a changeless entity we need to assume if we want to understand or interpret the change. So this unchanging witness consciousness is called as the self by Vedanta. That this witness consciousness is the self. Now, this awareness of this self reveals the true nature of our own being, which Upanishad called as Sakshi. Now, especially into the, I will just, I'm sorry for being using much this using making it technical, but this is an important point if we need to discuss that, especially in the Mandukya Upanishad, there is a 4 level of the consciousness are discussed. One is the waking, another is this, another is the dreaming, third is deep sleep, and fourth is the turiya. So what happens all the time when we work, we, for example, right now we are attending the lectures, we are thinking about what is happening, what will happen during our, when we are going to give the end-sem examination. This is called the waking consciousness. Second consciousness is the, basically, it is called as the sleeping. When we fall into the sleep and when we see the dream, so this is the dream. So in the dream also we are there. Third is the deep sleep. In the deep sleep, there is no dream, but there is a feeling of happiness. Why there is a, now there is a feeling of happiness in the deep sleep. This all we have experienced. Then whenever we have the deep sleep, when we wake up, when we wake up, we feel very fresh and we feel very happy. Now, this is an interesting argument. They say that in order to, when we are wake up and even when we are dreaming, we think, okay, there should be some object, there should object of enjoyment so that we feel happy. But in the deep sleep, there was no object because there is no, we are not dreaming anything. We are not seeing any object in the dream that, okay, I stood first in the examination and I got the job what I wanted to have. So there was nothing as such in the deep sleep, but still we feel happiness when we wake up. So they argue that this means that happiness can be produced when real happiness can be experienced when there is no object, which is the object of meditation. That in the meditation, when consciousness does not attach itself with the object, it can shine as happiness. So this leads to the 4th stage, which is called as the turiya. So there is a relationship between the witness and the turiya, because turiya is the happiness, and when we feel the, when we are basically when we are witness self, then we can feel as a sakshi. So this is basically the awareness of this is a self reveals the true nature of our own being, which Upanishad called as sakshi. I will give the example, and this is the final slide. Basically, in the Mundaka Upanishad, this is a very famous allegory of 2 birds. Dwa Suparna Sayuja Sakayam Samanam Vriksham Parisavjate Teuranyah Piplam Sadvatanna Shro Ananyo Abhicha Kashiti. that there are two birds, inseparable companions, perched on the same tree. One eats the fruit, the other looks on. The first
Yeah,
bird
it
is
get
our
excited.
individual self, feeding on the pleasures and the pain of his deeds, and sometimes become happy or unhappy by eating and enjoying. The other is the universal self, which silently witness all. So basically, what this allegory or this of multiplication suggests, it reveals the truth about our own self, that basically in our own existence there are the two kind of the self. Self is actually one, but there are there are the two levels of the consciousness. One is in the form of our individual self, which is showed in the times of the word, which eats the fruit, enjoys that. And another is the universal self-consciousness, which merely looks in, which is the witness self. And uh, so the aim of the Vedanta is to reach to this witness kind of the self. Now, with this, I finally end my talk, but just I kind of sum up what I tried to do in this talk. Basically, uh, uh, what I have tried to do in this talk is that first of all, Swami Vivekananda is considered as the one of the greatest saints who has interpreted the Vedanta in the modern life. Because earlier the Vedanta was so tough philosophy and it was remain confined to the scholars only.
मुझे iPhone चाहिए.
It was only Swami Vivekananda who brought it to the Western audience, to the Indian intellectual audience, to the modern audience. So reading Vivekananda is a very easy step in order to understand the Vedanta very clearly and very critically, because he anticipates all the problem because he himself gone through that. And the second thing is that if we are that consciousness is something which is a very puzzling phenomena even for the modern science. This is one of the very complex things. It is nothing like we cannot reduce the consciousness, because there is a naive opinion, okay, consciousness is something which can be interpreted if we consider, okay, brain is like a great computer machine and it can interpret each and everything. Because consciousness is not the mind. Mind can think in the form of the computer, but consciousness is something which is beyond that. So consciousness is a kind of a very puzzling phenomenon. Third problem in the consciousness is basically about the phenomenological, or what we say the qualia, that it is possible to, suppose if I am giving this talk, there is something my brain can process the information that how, what kind of that this is the class which happened at this time, and so many people are present. This people I know, this people I doesn't know, this happened, there was something happened, there's something not happened. So all this information my brain or the mind can process. But what I cannot express the feeling of the experience of going through, my lived experience of going through this conference. So this is called as the qualia, which we all experience in all kind of the experiences. Now, this feeling of the experience is something which brings us to the Vedanta and the meditative practices. So meditative practice or the reflection is not about, according to Swami Vivekananda, is a flight from the world or going to, for the personal salvation. Rather, it is observation and understanding how our mind functions. And he says that if we analyze our mind, we will find the mind is always hopping from one thought to the other. But in order to perceive this change, there is a kind of a witness self and the observer we have to assume in order to see this change. Now, this observer consciousness is our essential or the true self, which is called as the Turiya, and especially in this allegory of the two birds, it is basically the birds which merely see, which is merely witness, and it is not the mind. So finally, there is a kind of the distinction between the psychological self and the witness self, or what we say the philosophical distinction between the thought and the being. So that's all from my side, and I hope I must have raised more questions than the answers. And but in this short talk, it was only possible to just I have the roller coaster ride of the many thoughts put together. So I hope it has, if it is able to generate the questions in you, I will be very happy. And I will end the talk with the one statement of Swami Vivekananda when he was speaking about his guru. Ramakrishna Paramahansa to the Western audience. He says, whatever good you find in my talk, it is because of my guru and the faults are mine. So I'm similarly saying whatever good is actually good and interesting you found in my talk is because of Swamiji and Swami Vivekananda's idea, and whatever bad and unclarity you find, that is my fault. Thank you all for listening.